The HOA letter arrived on the coldest morning in January, taped to my front door like some kind of scarlet letter, and I knew before I even opened it that my quiet life in Boulder, Colorado, was about to get a whole lot more complicated. I stood there in my thermal bathrobe, steam rising from my coffee mug as I read the citation from Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. Apparently, the 6 inches of snow that had accumulated on my roof during last night's blizzard constituted a violation of Code 17-4-B, which stated that excessive snow accumulation posed a hazard to neighboring properties and diminished the aesthetic appeal of the community. The fine was $500, due within 7 days. I looked up at my roof, then at my neighbor's house. They had the same amount of snow. So did every other house on the street. The entire neighborhood looked like a Christmas card, pristine white roofs gleaming in the morning sun against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains. But somehow, only my mailbox had received this lovely notice. My name is Marcus Fitzgerald, and I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates 6 months ago after landing a software engineering job at a tech startup in Boulder. The house was perfect, a 3-bedroom ranch with a mountain view, hardwood floors, and a backyard that backed up to a greenbelt. The HOA seemed like a minor inconvenience at the time, something I had barely glanced at during closing. That was my first mistake. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed on the citation. A woman answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sharp and nasal. Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, this is Patricia speaking. Hi, Patricia. This is Marcus Fitzgerald from 2847 Pinecrest Drive. I just received a citation about snow on my roof, and I think there might be some mistake. No mistake, Mr. Fitzgerald. We documented the violation yesterday evening at 5:30 p.m. during our routine inspection. But everyone has snow on their roof. We just had a blizzard. Everyone else cleared their roofs this morning before 7 a.m., as required by community standards. You're the only holdout. I looked down the street again. The snow was still there on every roof I could see. I'm looking at the neighborhood right now, and that's simply not true. Her voice turned icy. Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Fitzgerald? I'm saying what I'm seeing doesn't match what you're telling me. The fine stands. You have 7 days. Good day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, anger bubbling up in my chest. This was insane. I went inside, grabbed my laptop, and started digging through the HOA bylaws I should have read more carefully before buying. Code 17-4-B did exist, buried in page 43 of a 60-page document. But the key word was excessive, which was defined as accumulation exceeding 12 inches or posing an immediate structural risk. We had 6 inches, maybe 7 in the deeper spots. I took photos of my roof and every other roof on the street, time-stamped them, and drafted an appeal letter. The bylaws stated that appeals had to be submitted within 72 hours and would be heard at the next board meeting. That meeting, according to the HOA website, was scheduled for Saturday at 10 a.m. in the community center. 3 days away. I spent those 3 days building my case. I measured the snow depth, took more photos, reviewed historical weather data, and even got a statement from a structural engineer friend who confirmed that 6 inches of fresh powder posed absolutely zero risk to a roof built to Colorado building codes. I also started asking around the neighborhood. That's when things got interesting. My next-door neighbor, an elderly man named Robert Chen, told me he had received 3 citations in the past year for various minor infractions. Grass a 1/4 inch too long. Holiday lights left up 2 days past the January 15th deadline. a garden gnome that apparently violated the decorative standards policy. He had paid every fine, over $2,000 total, because he was afraid they would put a lien on his house. "Patricia has it out for anyone who doesn't kiss her ring," Robert said as we stood in his driveway. "She runs this place like her personal fiefdom. The rest of the board just goes along with whatever she wants because she's got dirt on all of them." "What kind of dirt?" Robert shrugged. "Who knows? But nobody crosses her. Trust me, I've tried." "You're better off just paying the fine and staying under her radar." "But I'm not wired that way. Maybe it's the principle of the thing, or maybe I'm just stubborn, but I wasn't about to hand over $500 for something that wasn't actually a violation." So Saturday morning, I put on my best business casual outfit, grabbed my folder of evidence, and headed to the community center. The Meadowbrook Estates Community Center was a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a man-made pond. Inside, the main room had been set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the 5 board members sat like judges at a tribunal. Patricia Henderson occupied the center seat, and she looked exactly like I imagined. Mid-50s, blonde hair in a severe bob, pursed lips and eyes that could freeze water. She wore a navy blazer with an American flag pin and had a gavel within easy reach. About 20 other homeowners scattered throughout the seats. Most looked bored or resigned. I took a spot in the 3rd row and waited. Patricia called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of her gavel. They went through standard business first. Approval of last meeting's minutes. Financial report showing the HOA had over $300,000 in reserves. Discussion of whether to approve a new playground design, which Patricia shot down because the proposed color scheme didn't match the community aesthetic. Then we reached appeals and violations. First up, we have Marcus Fitzgerald appealing citation number 24-001-17. Patricia shuffled some papers without looking at me. "Mr. Fitzgerald, you have 5 minutes to state your case." I stood and walked to the front, laying out my printed photos on the table. "Thank you. On January 10th, I received a citation for excessive snow accumulation on my roof. However, the evidence clearly shows this was not a valid violation. First, the snow depth was only 6 inches, well below the 12-inch threshold defined in Code 17-4-B. Second, as these time-stamped photos demonstrate, every house in my vicinity had equivalent snow coverage. Third, I have a statement here from a licensed structural engineer confirming there was no safety risk. I pushed the documents forward. Patricia didn't even glance at them. The violation was for aesthetic concerns, not structural risk, she said. Your roof was visible from Pinecrest Drive and diminished the community's appearance during a critical showing period for prospective buyers. That's not what the citation says. It specifically mentions safety hazards. I'm clarifying the intent now. The fine stands. Next case. Wait, you're not even going to look at the evidence. Patricia finally made eye contact, and her expression could have curdled milk. Mr. Fitzgerald, this board has reviewed your appeal and found it without merit. The decision is final. If you don't pay within the remaining 4 days, we'll add late fees and move to place a lien on your property. Next case. Heat rushed to my face. This is completely arbitrary. You're just making things up as you go. The man to Patricia's left, a balding guy with glasses whose nameplate read Gerald Thompson, Vice President, leaned forward. Mr. Fitzgerald, I suggest you watch your tone. This board operates with full authority granted by the community bylaws you agreed to when you purchased your property. Authority doesn't mean you can ignore your own rules. Patricia's knuckles went white around her gavel. You're out of order. "Sit down or we'll have you removed." I wanted to keep arguing, but I also didn't want to get dragged out by whatever security they had. So I gathered my papers and returned to my seat, my mind racing. Around me, other homeowners avoided eye contact, except for one woman about my age who caught my eye and gave me a small, sympathetic nod. The meeting dragged on for another hour. They discussed landscaping contracts, approved new siding colors for 3 properties with the enthusiasm of prison wardens, and shot down a request to install solar panels because they would create an inconsistent roofline aesthetic. Every decision seemed designed to maximize control and minimize homeowner freedom. When the meeting finally ended, I was gathering my things when the woman who had nodded at me earlier approached. She had dark brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and wore jeans and a Colorado Rockies hoodie. "That was brutal," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Amanda Foster. I live over on Blue Ridge Court." I shook her hand. "Marcus, and yeah, that was something else. Patricia's been on a power trip lately. She fined me $300 last month because my 10-year-old daughter drew a hopscotch court on our driveway with chalk. Apparently, it violated the ban on driveway alterations." "You're kidding." "Wish I was. I paid it because I can't afford the legal fees to fight it, but it's gotten out of control. She's fined probably 30 different families in the past year alone. Everyone's terrified of her." We walked out together into the January sunshine. The snow had mostly melted from the roads, but plenty remained on roofs, including the community center's own roof, which I pointed out. "Interesting that she doesn't cite the HOA building for excessive snow," I said. Amanda laughed, but it was bitter. "Rules for thee but not for me, right?" We exchanged phone numbers and promised to stay in touch. As I drove home, my anger had transformed into something colder and more calculated. If Patricia wanted to play games, I could play games. But I needed to be smart about it. Over the next few days, I did research. I filed a public records request with the county for all HOA financial documents, which were required to be available under Colorado law. I also started talking to more neighbors, and the stories I heard made my blood boil. Patricia had been president for 8 years, running unopposed every election cycle. Anyone who challenged her mysteriously received a flood of citations right before the election period, drowning them in fines and legal threats until they withdrew. The HOA's financial records arrived on Wednesday, and that's when I found the first real anomaly. The HOA collected about $200,000 per year in dues from the 250 homes in Meadowbrook Estates. Operating expenses were around $120,000. That should have meant the reserve fund grew by $80,000 per year, but the growth was only about $40,000. Someone was siphoning money, and I had a pretty good idea who. I dug deeper, cross-referencing the vendor payments with actual services rendered. There was a landscaping company called Henderson Green Solutions that received $30,000 per year. The name caught my attention. A quick business registry search revealed it was registered to Patricia Henderson and her husband, Donald Henderson. The HOA was paying Patricia's own company for services and charging well above market rate. That wasn't just unethical. In Colorado, that was embezzlement and a conflict of interest that violated HOA law. I made copies of everything and started building a real case. But I also knew I needed leverage, because going to the authorities might take months, and Patricia would bury me in fines before then. I needed something more immediate. That's when the weather forecast caught my eye. Another major snowstorm was rolling in Friday night, expected to dump anywhere from 8 to 14 inches on Boulder. And guess what was scheduled for Saturday morning? The HOA's annual general meeting, the big one where all homeowners were invited and the board presented the yearly report. It was held in the community center's main hall, and according to the schedule on the website, it started at 10 a.m. and ran until noon. An idea formed in my mind. It was petty. It was probably stupid, but it would make a statement. The storm hit Friday evening with a vengeance. I watched from my window as snow piled up, thick and heavy. By midnight, we had already received 10 inches and it was still coming down. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. When I woke up, the world was buried under 14 inches of fresh snow. It covered everything, including my roof, which was now definitely in violation of Patricia's made-up interpretation of the rules. I smiled and got dressed in my warmest gear. Most people use roof rakes or hire services to clear snow. I called a buddy from my old construction job days, a guy named Rick who owned equipment rental. "Do you have a small front-end loader available today?" "For what? Let's call it a project. I'll pay double the rental rate cash," Rick laughed. "This ought to be good." "Yeah, I got one." "Want me to deliver it?" "That would be perfect." By 8 a.m., I had a compact Bobcat loader sitting in my driveway. By 8:30, I had used a ladder and some creative engineering to create a channel system from my roof edge. The snow was heavy, perfect packing snow, and there was a lot of it. I worked carefully, using the loader's bucket to catch the snow as I pushed it off in controlled sections, then dumping it into a growing pile. But I wasn't piling it in my yard. Oh no. The community center was 3 houses down and across the street. It had a large circular driveway in front and a covered entrance portico where people would enter for the meeting. I made trip after trip with the Bobcat, dumping load after load of snow right in that driveway and piling it especially high around the entrance. By 9:15, I had relocated approximately half my roof's worth of snow, creating a wall of white that completely blocked the community center's main entrance. It was beautiful, towering, packed, and absolutely immovable without serious equipment. A few neighbors came out to watch. Robert Chen laughed so hard I thought he might hurt himself. Amanda showed up with coffee and a video camera. "You're insane," she said, grinning. "I love it." "Just clearing my roof like Patricia wanted," I said innocently. By 9:45, cars started arriving for the meeting. The first few drivers stopped, stared at the snow wall, and tried to figure out what to do. Some parked on the street and attempted to climb over. A couple gave up and left. Patricia's silver Mercedes pulled up at 9:55, and I watched with satisfaction as she got out, saw the obstruction, and her face turned the color of a ripe tomato. She stormed through the snow, actually climbed over part of the wall in her business skirt and heels, and made it to the entrance looking like a drowned cat. I was already inside, having entered through the side door 30 minutes earlier. I had saved a seat in the front row. When Patricia entered the hall, snow dripping from her hair and clothes, she looked directly at me. If looks could kill, I would have been vaporized. "What have you done?" she hissed. "Just followed the HOA guidelines. I had excessive snow on my roof, so I cleared it." "You didn't specify where I should put it. You blocked the entrance to a community building that belongs to all of us. I figured you wouldn't mind since community standards are so important to you." Other board members started filing in, all looking disheveled and angry. Gerald Thompson had snow in his glasses. The treasurer, a woman named Sharon Price, had clearly fallen at some point because her pants were soaked. Only about 30 homeowners made it inside, half the usual attendance, and most of them were laughing. Patricia tried to compose herself, sitting at the head table and furiously wiping snow from her blazer. She banged the gavel with more force than necessary. "This meeting will come to order." And after we conclude official business, we will be discussing serious vandalism charges against Marcus Fitzgerald. It's not vandalism to clear snow from my property, I said calmly, which I was fined for not doing, if you recall. You deliberately obstructed access to a community building. I put snow on community property. If anything, I was doing volunteer landscaping work, though I didn't charge the HOA $30,000 for it like Henderson Green Solutions does. The room went silent. Patricia's face drained of color. What did you say? I stood up and pulled out the folder I had prepared. I said I didn't charge the HOA $30,000 per year like Henderson Green Solutions, the landscaping company that you own and have been funneling HOA money to for the past 8 years. Which, by the way, is embezzlement and a violation of Colorado HOA law regarding conflicts of interest. I walked to the front and slapped the documents on the table. Bank records, business filings, payment receipts. Comparative pricing from other landscaping companies showing Henderson Green Solutions charged 2 to 3 times the market rate. You want to talk about violations, I continued. Let's talk about how you've stolen over $240,000 from this community. Let's talk about how you've weaponized citations to crush anyone who questions you. Let's talk about how you've turned this HOA into your personal piggy bank. Patricia grabbed the documents, her hands shaking. Gerald leaned over to look, his eyes widening. Murmurs spread through the room. This is slander, Patricia said, but her voice had lost its edge. It's documented fact. I've filed a complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's office and sent copies to every homeowner's email address, which I got from the HOA directory that you're required by law to maintain. Amanda started clapping. Then Robert joined in, then more people. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. Patricia stood up, knocking her chair backward. This meeting is adjourned. You can't adjourn, Gerald said, finding his spine for apparently the first time in years. We need to address this. Patricia, is this true? I don't have to answer to you. Actually, you do, Sharon Price said, the treasurer. I review the books, but I never thought to check the business registrations. If you've been funneling money to your own company, that's illegal. We need to suspend you pending an investigation. You can't suspend me. I'm the president. The bylaws say the board can suspend any member for financial impropriety with a majority vote, I said. I had read those bylaws very carefully by now. You need 3 out of 5 votes. Gerald looked at Sharon, then at the other 2 board members. I move to suspend Patricia Henderson immediately and freeze her access to HOA accounts pending investigation. Second, Sharon said. All in favor? Gerald asked. 4 hands went up. Only Patricia's stayed down. This is illegal, Patricia sputtered. I'll sue all of you. With what money? I asked. Because I'm guessing the AG's office is going to freeze your assets once they start investigating. Patricia grabbed her purse and coat, glaring at me with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've done. You've ruined everything. No, I've fixed everything. There's a difference. She stormed out, slipping twice on the wet floor. The room burst into conversation. Gerald banged the gavel, trying to restore order. Okay. This is unprecedented, but we need to handle this properly. Marcus, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll need to hire an independent auditor and likely legal counsel. In the meantime, I'm moving to dismiss all citations issued in the past 12 months and refund those fines pending review of whether they were legitimate. More applause. Robert was crying happy tears. The meeting continued for another 2 hours as we worked through the implications. I volunteered to serve on an interim oversight committee to review HOA operations. Amanda did too. Several other homeowners who had been silently suffering under Patricia's reign spoke up about their experiences. By the time we finished, it was clear that Meadowbrook Estates was about to undergo a major transformation. The community actually felt like a community for the first time, as people filed out, many having to navigate the snow wall which I offered to remove with the bobcat. Gerald pulled me aside. "That was one hell of an entrance," he said, "and I mean literally dumping snow on our meeting. Sometimes you need to make a statement." "Well, you made one, but I have to ask, what made you dig into the finances? Most people would have just paid the fine and moved on." "I don't like bullies," I said, "and I really don't like corrupt bullies who abuse their power. Patricia made this personal when she targeted me for something that wasn't even a real violation. She just picked the wrong person to mess with." Gerald nodded. "I'm ashamed I let it go on so long." I knew something was off, but I was afraid to challenge her. She threatened to expose some personal information if I ever crossed her. "What information?" "My son had a DUI 5 years ago. She found out somehow and said she'd make sure everyone in the neighborhood knew if I didn't vote her way." It was stupid. I should have called her bluff. "Don't beat yourself up. She was good at manipulation, but it's over now." I spent the rest of that Saturday clearing the snow wall and returning the bobcat. Rick thought the whole story was hilarious and refused to charge me the full rental fee. "Worth it for the entertainment value," he said. Sunday was quiet. I half expected retaliation from Patricia, maybe vandalism or another flurry of citations, but nothing came. Monday morning, I saw an unmarked police car parked in front of her house. By Monday afternoon, the neighborhood email chain was buzzing with the news that Patricia and her husband had been arrested on embezzlement charges. The investigation moved fast once the Attorney General's office got involved. Turned out the landscaping company fraud was just the beginning. Patricia had also been taking kickbacks from contractors who wanted to work in the neighborhood, demanding payment under the table to get their bids approved. She had falsified invoices and diverted HOA funds to personal accounts. The total amount exceeded $300,000 over 8 years. Donald Henderson flipped on her almost immediately, claiming he had no knowledge of the fraud, which I doubted but couldn't prove. Patricia tried to fight the charges, but with the documentary evidence I had compiled plus testimony from multiple contractors who were tired of her shakedown schemes, the case was airtight. In March, she pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of authority. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to repay the full amount plus damages. Her house went up for sale to cover the restitution. Donald filed for divorce. The HOA held new elections in April. Gerald stayed on as president, having proved himself willing to stand up and do the right thing once the immediate threat was gone. Amanda was elected to the board as well. I declined to run, preferring to stay involved as a regular community member rather than getting sucked into the bureaucracy. The auditor's report revealed even more irregularities, but most of the money was recovered through asset seizures and insurance claims. The HOA instituted new oversight procedures, term limits, and transparent financial reporting. We also rewrote large portions of the bylaws to eliminate vague language that could be weaponized for petty enforcement. My citation was formally dismissed, and I received a refund check for $500 even though I had never paid it. I donated it to the community fund for the new playground, which was approved with bright colors and everything Patricia would have hated. Robert Chen stopped by one evening in late spring with a bottle of bourbon to say thank you. We sat on my back porch, looking out at the mountains as the sun set. "You know, I lived in fear for 2 years," he said. "Afraid to put up a birdhouse or plant the wrong color flowers. It's like I forgot I actually owned my house. That's what she counted on, fear and compliance. Well, you did what none of us had the guts to do. You fought back. I shrugged. I was in the right position to do it. No kids, no skeletons in my closet she could threaten me with, and stubborn enough to see it through. Plus, I really hate being told what to do when it doesn't make sense. Robert laughed. That snow wall was legendary. Someone made a TikTok of it that got like 2 million views. You're kidding. Nope. Look up hashtag HOA revenge. You're famous. I did look it up later, and sure enough, there was Amanda's video showing me dumping load after load of snow in front of the community center, with Patricia's arrival as the grand finale. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with thousands of people sharing their own HOA horror stories. But the real victory wasn't the viral video or even getting Patricia arrested. It was the way the neighborhood changed. People started actually talking to each other again. Block parties happened. Kids played outside without parents worrying about citation-worthy activities. Someone started a community garden using HOA common space, something Patricia would have shut down immediately. The community center became an actual community gathering space rather than a courthouse. We started hosting movie nights, holiday parties, and even a summer concert series. Meadowbrook Estates transformed from a place where people lived in quiet desperation to an actual neighborhood where people wanted to live. I ran into Gerald at the grocery store in June. He told me they were planning a neighborhood appreciation day in July and wanted to give me some kind of award. "Please don't," I said. "I didn't do it for recognition. I just wanted to be able to keep snow on my roof without getting fined." "Too bad. You're getting a plaque. We already ordered it." The appreciation day was actually pretty fun. There was a barbecue, games for kids, and yes, they gave me a plaque that read Marcus Fitzgerald, Community Hero, for having the courage to stand up when it mattered. It hangs in my garage now, next to my bike rack. Patricia served 18 months before being released on parole. I heard she moved to Arizona to live with her sister. Donald stayed in Colorado but moved to Denver. Their house sold to a young couple with twins who immediately painted their front door bright yellow, something that would have given Patricia an aneurysm. The snow came again the following winter, blanketing the neighborhood in white. I let it stay on my roof until it naturally melted, and nobody said a word. Well, Robert joked that I should get the bobcat again, but it was good-natured. The weight of Patricia's reign of terror had lifted, and everyone could breathe easier. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had just paid the $500 fine. I probably would have avoided a lot of stress and conflict. But I also would have let Patricia continue victimizing my neighbors, stealing money, and destroying what should have been a pleasant place to live. Sometimes standing up for what's right means getting your hands dirty, or in this case, getting your hands cold and snowy. Sometimes it means making a dramatic statement, like burying an HOA meeting under 14 inches of snow. And sometimes it means spending hours combing through financial records to expose corruption. But it's always worth it. Because communities are only as good as the people who refuse to let bullies run them. Because property rights mean nothing if you live in fear of arbitrary enforcement. And because sometimes justice is served one bobcat load of snow at a time. The best part, I never got another citation. Not for snow, not for grass length, not for anything. And when I eventually put up solar panels 2 years later, ones that absolutely did create an inconsistent roofline, the HOA approved them unanimously. Gerald even came over to ask about the installation process, because he wanted some too. That's the thing about tyrants. They seem invincible right until they're not. Patricia had built an empire on fear and financial fraud, but it only took one person saying no to bring the whole thing crashing down. Well, one person and about 3 cubic yards of snow strategically placed at a community meeting. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates. My startup did well, I got promoted, and I've thought about upgrading to a bigger house. But I stay because this is home now. Not just the house, but the community we built from the ashes of Patricia's corrupt regime. Amanda and I actually started dating about a year after the Great Snow Incident, as it became known. She appreciates my stubborn streak, probably because she has one too. We joke that we bonded over mutual hatred of HOA corruption, which isn't the most romantic origin story, but it works for us. Last month, we hosted a neighborhood block party, something that happens regularly now. Robert brought his famous potato salad. Gerald shared pictures of his new solar panels. Kids ran around playing tag without any parents worrying about citations for excessive noise or trampled grass. As the sun set and people lingered, talking and laughing, I looked around at the community we had built. A community where people felt free to live their lives, make their homes their own, and not live in fear of petty tyrants with gavels and attitudes. All because I refused to pay an unjust fine for snow on my roof, and decided to clear that snow in the most dramatic way possible. Some people might call it petty revenge. I call it justice with a sense of humor. And if another Patricia ever tries to take over the HOA, well, I still have Rick's phone number and I know exactly where to rent a bobcat. Because sometimes the best defense against corruption is a well-placed pile of snow and the courage to say, no. The plaque in my garage reminds me every day that ordinary people can make extraordinary differences when they refuse to accept injustice as normal. That's standing up to bullies matters. That community is worth fighting for. And that snow, when used correctly, is an excellent tool for civil protest. 3 years after the incident, Meadowbrook Estates has one of the highest property values in Boulder, not because of strict aesthetic enforcement, but because it's a place where people actually want to live, where neighbors look out for each other instead of reporting each other, where the HOA serves the community instead of ruling it. Patricia Henderson's legacy isn't the tightly controlled neighborhood she tried to create. It's the vibrant, free community that rose up once she was gone. And every winter, when the snow falls on my roof, I smile and let it stay as long as I want. Because it's my house, my roof, and my choice. That's what freedom looks like. And it's worth any amount of cold weather, conflict, and strategically placed snow to protect it.